Well, actually, we already understand what Ukraine's political leadership is. It is no longer any kind of political leadership. Since March of last year, a group of individuals, a criminal gang, an organized criminal community has usurped power and, under the pretext of the need for war with Russia, has held on to this power in Ukraine for the purpose of personal enrichment.
All eyes are now on the so-called peace plan presented by the Trump administration, a plan that's supposed to end Russia's war against Ukraine. Moscow is watching closely too, but the official line has not changed. The Kremlin keeps accusing Ukraine and Europe of Nazism and insists that Russia's demands remain untouched. New week, new nonsense from Russia. I'm Sofia and this is Spin Snipers, where we turn Kremlin drama into bite-sized reality checks. According to media reports, the Trump team supposedly crafted this peace plan after some quiet back channel whispering with Moscow. And many outlets immediately run with the idea that Kyiv is now under enormous pressure, with claims that the US might even be ready to deal back military aid to push Ukraine toward negotiations. Because nothing screams peace like a plan allegedly co-written with the country that launched the invasion. But here is the real question. Is Moscow actually interested in peace or in just pretending they are while reaching for more territory? Let's hear it straight from the Russian dictator himself, dressed in his favorite military cosplay, explaining Russia's objectives.
But we have our own tasks and goals, the main ones being the unconditional achievement of the objectives of the special military operation and the fulfillment of the tasks set before us by our fatherland and the people of Russia.
Whether Russia is ready for peace is purely a rhetorical question, and maybe that's exactly why the terrorist state keeps killing civilians in Ukraine. Just on the night of November 21st, Russia launched yet another round of terrorist strikes on Ukrainian cities. In Zaporizhia, FAB bombs and drones hit shopping areas and residential buildings. 5 people were killed, 5 more were injured, including a 17-year-old. In Odessa, a drone attack wounded 5 people, among them a 16-year-old boy. Russia is deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure and essential service across Ukrainian cities. These are war crimes and crimes that Russia must be held accountable for. Meanwhile, Putin openly admits that Russia is perfectly comfortable continuing to achieve its objectives by military means. So for anyone who thinks it's Ukraine who's blocking Trump's peace plan, the Russian dictator made it crystal clear. The points in the plan need further discussion. Translation from Kremlin speak: Putin is not ready to sign anything, not instantly, not remotely, not even performatively.
If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposals and refuses to do so, then both they and the European warmongers must understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably repeat themselves in other key areas of the front. Maybe not as quickly as we would like, but it will inevitably happen. And overall, we are fine with that because it leads to achieving the goals of the special military operation by military means, through armed struggle. But as I have said many times before, we are also ready for peace talks and for resolving issues through peaceful means. However, this of course requires a substantive discussion of all the details of the proposed plan.
So the next time someone tells you that it's Ukraine who refuses to negotiate, remember the attacks and the people killed in those attacks. Ordinary Ukrainian civilians. And remember this too, Russia has not shifted an inch from its original demands. Even inside Russia, officials keep repeating the same script. Here is what Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov writes in his op-ed for foreign media. As you can see, the so-called conditions for peace have not changed since 2022.
Clearly, a sustainable settlement of the conflict is possible only by eliminating its root causes. It is necessary to reliably guarantee Russia's security, to neutralize the threats arising from NATO's aggressive expansion, and to put an end to attempts to draw Ukraine into this militaristic alliance. It is equally important to ensure the rights of Russians and Russian-speaking people in the territories controlled by the Kyiv regime.
Meanwhile, Russia's TV pundits keep shouting, Zelensky rejected the peace plan. Fact check, he didn't. In reality, Ukraine has not rejected the US proposal. On Friday, November 21st, President Volodymyr Zelensky discussed the plan with US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of the Army Daniel Driscoll. They agreed that Ukraine, together with the US and Europe, will work at the advisory level to make the path to peace actually workable. And Kyiv keeps repeating one clear point: any peace deal must respect Ukraine's independence and sovereignty. Pretty basic stuff for any country, really, except apparently for the one that keeps invading its neighbors. Meanwhile, Moscow is in no hurry whatsoever. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the level of contact between Russia and the US on Trump's peace plan still needs to be defined, which in Kremlin language usually means we'll stall until we figure out how to twist it to our advantage.
Well, supposedly, Zelensky has again refused another plan for a peaceful settlement.
His masters forbid him. After all, his masters aren't the Americans.
Well, what I would, if I may be so bold, suggest to the President of the United States is that he turn to the classics and remember that expression. Again, it's from American history. Make him an offer he can't refuse. In my view, this phrase has not yet been voiced by the US President.
But here is the thing: the EU's position, refusing to sacrifice Ukraine's interests or break international law, especially when it comes to Ukraine's territorial integrity, is something Moscow just can't stomach. For the Kremlin, respecting Ukraine's borders means the only one thing: Russia's losses. And losing, as we know, is not part of Putin's vocabulary. So when the Trump administration talks about compromises on both sides, you have to wonder, did Moscow hear that part? Or did they just selectively mute these bites that don't fit their fantasy version of victory?
Our mistake is that we do not understand what Europeans mean when they talk about peace. For Europeans, there is no such thing as peace. What they mean by this word is the defeat of Russia. The only outcome that satisfies the Europeans who speak about this is Russia's defeat. That is why, when they say, Russia must stop, Russia must be punished, Russia must pay, this is the imposition of the victor's position on the defeated. Moreover, for them, systematically, Russia must lose in any conflict. It is expected to lose.
And of course, straight from the classic Kremlin playbook, Europe is to blame for absolutely everything. According to Moscow, if only the EU would stop sending weapons to Kyiv, the war would magically end tomorrow. Right, spoken to the same country that refuses even a basic ceasefire along the existing front lines. Truly shocking logic. Russia starts the war, bombs civilians, rejects a ceasefire, and then blames Europe for prolonging the conflict. Incredible. If mental gymnastics were an Olympic sport, Moscow would take home gold every year.
The push to draw Ukraine into NATO, I repeat, is beginning to sink in even among the most skeptically minded segments of the population. The militarization of Ukraine is creating such fundamental threats to the security of the Russian Federation that our country cannot help but respond with all the means at its disposal. Therefore, such irresponsible actions by Paris and the overall supply of Western weapons to the Kyiv regime not only fail to contribute to resolving the conflict conflict, but
Ну,
on the
буквально с
contrary,
неизбежностью
inevitably
приводит
lead
к
to
его
its
затягиванию,
prolongation,
расширению,
expansion
эскалации.
and escalation.
Я думаю, что всем должно быть ясно, Париж делает это намеренно. Я хочу это подчеркнуть.
What surprised me most are the words of Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman about fundamental threats to Russia's security for a country sitting on the world's second largest nuclear arsenal. Wow, so what exactly is that terrifying weapon the West is supposedly sending to Kyiv? A little more on the negotiations, because I want to be clear, is Russia actually ready to negotiate? Really? Putin, on top of all his original demands and blaming Ukraine for the root causes of the conflict, also considers the Ukrainian leadership illegitimate. Zelensky and the entire Ukrainian government, according to him, are criminal group that seized power. And honestly, that's rich coming from a man who has ruled his own country for over 23 years and has changed his constitution several times just to stay in power. So tell me, if these are criminals, how exactly is Putin planning to sit down at the negotiation table with them?
Well, actually, we already understand what Ukraine's political leadership is. It is no longer any kind of political leadership. Since March of last year, a group of individuals, a criminal gang, an organized criminal community has usurped power and, under the pretext of the need for war with Russia, has held on to this power in Ukraine for the purpose of personal enrichment.
And just to make sure the Americans really believe in Russia's mighty power, the Russians are already claiming they've captured Kupiansk, because apparently nothing proves military skill like celebrating victories that don't exist.
On the Kupiansk direction, the assault units of the 68th Motorized Rifle Division of the 6th Army have completed the liberation of the city of Kupiansk.
So that's it? Fully secured?
Exactly. The city is under our control, with only small, isolated enemy groups being eliminated. The city was a key node in the enemy's defense and an important logistical center for the Ukrainian armed forces in this sector.
The capture of Kupiansk by the Russian army? Total fake. Russian channels are spreading claims from the Russian military political leadership about supposed full control over Kupiansk and the destruction of the Ukrainian garrison. In reality, it's just another lie. The Ukrainian general staff has already checked and reminded everyone that Russian propagandists have been claiming they took Kupiansk for over months, while in fact, nothing of the sort has happened. Their only achievements? Terrorizing civilians and constant missile and drone attacks. Even the Ukrainian National Security and Defense Council Center for Countering Disinformation confirms it. Russia has not captured Kupiansk.
The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports that Kupiansk remains under the control of the Defense Forces of Ukraine. Counter-sabotage measures and special operations aimed at detecting and eliminating enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups that have infiltrated the city are ongoing in the city and its suburbs. A similar situation is observed in Yampil. Search and strike operations by our troops continue in the area of the settlement. The statement regarding the alleged capture of 80% of Vovchansk in Kharkiv region and 70% of Pokrovsk is also false. Search and assault operations and the elimination of enemy forces in the urban area of Pokrovsk are ongoing. Additional logistical routes to Pokrovsk and Mirnorad are being arranged to ensure uninterrupted support for our units. Assault groups of the occupiers, as well as their assembly sites, are being identified and destroyed.
That's it for today. While the Russian propaganda machine keeps running, we'll keep exposing their lies. I'm Sofia and this was Spin Snipers. Stay curious, stay skeptical and don't fall for the spin.